is the year 2020, and Nigeria is not one of the world's top 20 economies. Yet again, the government has been unable to meet its long term plans. This time I'm referring to the Vision 2020. And many of us can point to the reasons why this has not been achieved. Nigeria is notorious for having one of the most expensive governments in the world. You wonder how we are able to be the most expensive, have the most expensive government, despite being the poverty capital of the world. A PwC report states that approximately about 400,000 people in government, that's 0.2% of the Nigerian population, earn a third, about 33% of the country's yearly budget. And you see, promises to keep government expenses low have consistently failed. The type of due diligence also going in the country's financial planning has been deliberately comical. Between 2011 and 2018, Nigeria's projected revenues, which appear in the budget, are falling short of the actual revenues for every single year. What this has translated into is more borrowing to cover up for the deficits, thereby consistently raising the debt profile of the country. In the period under review, I mean from 2011 to 2018, the federal government did not achieve the revenue projections for both oil and non-oil revenues. And the gap between projected oil revenue and the actual revenue inflow continues to widen. It's also increasing the need for to borrow to close this growing deficit. The problem, however, is not just the borrowings or the size of the government's budget. It is also capital efficiency that basically seems to be lacking. So despite the rising expenditure of the country, there's very little to show that significantly adds value to the lives of citizens. Implementation of the recurrent expenditure portion of the budget, continues to outperform capital spending. In 2018, the budgeted recurrent expenses stood at about 3.52 trillion, but actual recurrent expenses incurred for the year was about 3.24 trillion, which represents 92% implementation rate. You see, in contrast, the capital budget implementation was slightly above half, about 58% of the over 2.8 trillion budgeted for the same year. Since 2010, except for 2015, the federal government has not been able to implement up to 3/4 of its capital spending plan. This gives us a clear picture of why the country has failed miserably in achieving its Vision 2020 goals to become one of the 20 best economies in the world. The long-term plan did not make a dent on Nigeria's developmental challenges, as many Nigerians are in worse socioeconomic conditions than ever before. Nigeria is among the top 10 countries in the misery index. We also have one of Africa's highest unemployment rates, with 23% of our population, that's about 18 million of the labor force, mostly young people, currently without jobs. At the failure of the Vision 2020, the government has again set out to create another plan for a nearby 2050, with the president inaugurating a steering committee just recently. Will the government achieve its next long-term plans? History adjudges that it will be another bogus compilation of goals that are never met. However, if this will change, what are the key steps to follow? I'll say that the first is willpower. A serious government must prioritize its capital projects, and a capital project completion rate of just about 50% year in, year out in a country that lacks key infrastructure can only spell doom for a country's growth plans. So when less than 3/4 of the country's capital expenditure remains unused for such important projects, the government cannot claim to be keen on development of the communities or development of infrastructure. Infrastructure is responsible for sustainable growth, and the less the government has, the less the growth it can experience. It's pretty straightforward. The second is running a lean government. The government must plan to narrow down the cost of its workforce to reduce this drastically and also recurrent expenditure. And the government must place more concern in delivering an efficient government. Efficiency and a lean government is paramount. The government has so far found it easier to raise taxes over cutting down on its expenses. This has led to underwhelming trust in the government. Our citizens believe their government will squander their hard earned money, and you begin to wonder if running a lean government is impossible. Many countries do it. While the government may understandably not be able to cut costs in all sectors, it must examine areas where it can and implement a more efficient governance process. According to a McKinsey report, by improving an operating system, the configuration of assets, materials, resources, and staff, a lean approach can cut out dramatically, typically by 15 to 30%. This can add a significant chunk to the capital budget and sometimes even cover for the need to borrow money. Several governments have successfully taken this approach in delivering on public goods. Some have done it partially, like the United States, which runs a lean management across the US Army, the US Department of Agriculture, the US Department of Housing and Urban Development, as well as several state and local governments. Australia, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, Ireland, Netherlands, South Africa, Sweden, and the United Kingdom are others whose governments are successfully promoting lean programs. Strategic planning is also very important. Forecasts are rarely ever efficient in preparing for the future. Aside from the fact that they are always likely wrong, they do not accommodate for the flexibility that life demands. An entity's ability to be in perpetual adjustment to correct and conform with the present is key to success. Nigeria must take a scenario planning approach. Instead, this ensures that it continues to listen and adjust to indicators and flags, and thus sort of defines the period between the goals and the final delays. While governments are not as flexible as small businesses, blindly following forecasts that are normally misplaced eventually hurts the people both in the short and long term. Employing scenarios helps the government identify and prepare not just for the future it desires, but also other plausible futures that may derail or accelerate its plans. Scenario planning provides those who use it with the alertness needed to navigate complex systems while empowering them to build for swift changes. In the UK, the Government Office for Science, it's called Geoscience, ensures that government policies and decisions are informed by the best scientific evidence and strategic long-term thinking. The government is thus able to kickstart the right discussions with important stakeholders that are key to the development of policies and the direction of government spending. Strategic futures planning also drives us to better understanding the variables in our plan and adjust them early if they are not showing signs of promise. Rather than create policies that are inflexible over a 10-year period or more, the government should create a process that allows the combination of indicators that helps it to adjust policies accordingly, to immediate needs. In addition, we may identify and understand gaps in our knowledge and suggest areas of new research that are required to understand driving forces better. We can build consensus amongst a range of stakeholders about the issues and how to tackle them, and we identify and make explicit some of these difficult policy choices. You have trade-offs, and you know how to pick those in the future. And finally, we are able to create a new strategy that is resilient because it is adaptable to external changes, and you mobilize stakeholders to drive action. This will set the government on a more realistic path. With these few things implemented, it will mean that the government will be a lot more, adaptable to changes that happen, and governance would be reduced. The cost of governance will be reduced drastically. Government becomes lean. Taxes don't have to be raised higher, and everyone lives in a much more sustainable future. Thank you very much. Innovation, innovation, innovation.